Hello everyone, this is Tom Fox and I'd like to welcome you to episode 264 of the FCPA Compliance and Ethics Report. The FCPA Compliance and Ethics Report is sponsored by the Red Flag Group. The Red Flag Group is a business advisory, information services, and technological firm that helps companies and clients manage risk across 4 key risk areas. These areas include sales and sales channels, including distributors, resellers, partners, suppliers, customers, and human capital, of course, including employees and contractors. You can find out more information on the Red Flag Group at their website, which is www.redflaggroup.com. Today, I am pleased to have back with me my good friend and colleague, John Champion. John is one half of the podcasting duo at missionlogpodcast.com, which is exploring every episode of every Star Trek television and movie show. In today's episode, John and I focus on 2 of my favorite TNG episodes, The Best of Both Worlds and Yesterday's Enterprise. And we also touch upon the 50th anniversary of the original series Star Trek, what it means for people this year, and some of the celebrations and events that John and his partner Ken Ray are going to attend. The episode comes in at just about 30 minutes. This is Tom Fox. I hope you enjoy this episode. Hello everyone, this is Tom Fox and I'd like to welcome you to this episode of the FCPA Compliance and Ethics Report. I'm absolutely thrilled to have back today John Champion. John Champion is one half of a human-robot combination that has the greatest podcast, I think, in the podcast universe, well beyond the planet Earth. And it's missionlogpodcast.com, where they talk about all things, every episode, movie, Star Trek. So I've had John on before and finally was able to get him back. And John, thanks so much for taking the time to visit with me today.
Pleasure to be here, Tom. Thank you again for having me on. I always like talking Trek and talking to other pop culture with you as well.
So we are now into, I think you're into the 4th season of TNG. You just finished up the 3rd season, is that right?
Actually, we're about to record our final episode of season 4.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. We've got, I think, just 2 more to go. So we'll be recording our next to last today, and then recording our final episode early next week.
So the 2 episodes I wanted to focus on today that you did earlier this year were yesterday's, maybe even towards the end of last year, were Yesterday's Enterprise and then The Best of Both Worlds. Many people think these are 2 of the top episodes of TNG. They're certainly 2 of my favorites. I can't say I like one more than the other because they're both great, but there's a couple of things that I wanted to visit with you and drill down a little bit on. And the first one was kind of the following question. Now that you've gone through this journey, and certainly you are well read and well versed in science fiction before you came to this project, it struck me that these episodes were, one of the reasons they were great is it was great science fiction. There was action, there was Futurama, there was the question of what humans might evolve into, there was a question of time travel back, there was time travel forward. It really just had a wide range. Both episodes had a wide range of science fiction topics. So I guess I wanted to ask is it a requirement for a great episode to be great science fiction, or is it really just a great story?
Well, I think the thing that both of those episodes have is there's really a central story about character. There's really a central story there about people who are challenged. So even though the science fiction trappings are great, because Star Trek has great episodes that are about people that have very little to do with science fiction, but then other great episodes that maybe have everything to do with technobabble and spaceships that don't necessarily work out as great episodes. The thing that these 2 have, when you look at Best of Both Worlds, the whole arc over the 2-parter there, it's about the challenge that Riker faces, and it's about the peril that Picard is in. So these are the 2 characters we're most heavily invested in. When you look at Yesterday's Enterprise, it's about the decision that Picard has to make, and it's also about the decision that Tasha Yar has to make, giving her life meaning. giving her death meaning. So I think these are the elements of human drama that really elevate those. Now, it doesn't hurt that you've got a great kind of mind-bending science fiction story around it, and you've got some technology and some real what-if questions to grapple with. So I think those definitely, and particularly for a show like Yesterday's Enterprise, it has that sort of Twilight Zone feel to it. You know, what if my life were something different than I know it to be now? So these are terrific ideas to kind of play with in a science fiction universe, but I think ultimately it has to come down to the heart of the characters. And if you as a viewer are invested in the hearts of those characters, then you can't help but want to go on that journey with them.
That's really interesting. So, as you know, I'm a Texan, and kind of one of the things we celebrate here in Texas is the Alamo and the Last Stand and kind of line in the sand and all of that. And when I saw Yesterday's Enterprise, that's what it really reminded me and struck me as. It was really a last stand, even if it's in your heart or your head. But the other thing that the first thing that struck me about that episode was a character who was not present, and that was the Klingon Empire. And the Klingons, the history changed because the Klingons valued honor more than anything. And by the Enterprise, that particular Enterprise sacrificing itself, that brought a level of rapprochement to the Federation and the Klingon Empire, which led to, if not an alliance, at least an understanding, and allowed the two peoples to move forward without trying to kill each other for the next millennia.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's sort of the nice thing is that any show like this, you know, Star Trek having been around for as long as it has now, but even as long as it had been by the time Yesterday's Enterprise aired, you already had the original series, you already had a handful of movies out, you already had the animated series, you already had books. So the idea of this big universe that all of this exists in, I'm not a watcher of Game of Thrones now. I promise that because I know that everybody loves it, I will actually sit down and marathon the whole thing and get caught up. But I know that one of the reasons that people love that show is because it has this extensive web of sort of background political intrigue and nation building and all these characters who overlap and intersect with each other. And that's something that Star Trek really didn't have much of in the original series, frankly, just because TV wasn't made that way with the original series when that show came on the air. But by the time you got to Next Gen, that's sort of a middle ground between the very complex shows that we get now and the very episodic, very almost anthology-style shows that we had with the original series. So I think part of the investment of the audience is that by the time Star Trek got to its third season, they were really making an effort to grow that backstory and to grow that universe that all of this took place in. Because they know that, okay, I'm a viewer who's wondering, well, what are the Klingons doing about this? What are the Borg doing in the background when we don't see them? When are they going to show up again? What's Q doing during all of this? And how do these different characters react to all of these various threats or complications to what they're doing?
And if we could maybe turn to the best of both worlds, one of the things it had that my dog's going to have to protect us from killer garbage men right now.
Of course. And a good job, I think.
Yeah. Yes. We had action and action. And that was, Star Trek developed some fabulous graphics for television, but that was really the first episode that I went wow at, with the battle scenes in Wolf 354, the post-battle. I thought were just stunningly good for television at that time.
Yeah, no, I agree. They did a very smart thing on The Next Generation, which any good TV producer on a series will do, which is you bank your budget in order to blow it on the really good stuff. So,
Okay.
they're very clever about creating what they call bottle shows, which is you create a show where everything takes place on the standing sets. You don't have to create much. Maybe you bring in a guest star or two at the most, but everything takes place in an environment that you already have. But then you do that because you're saving money toward a much bigger show later on. And that's what they did with Best of Both Worlds. You had a lot of new sets, new graphics, new costumes, as they kept evolving the Borg from the first time that we had seen them in Q Who, and they will continue to evolve until, the last we see of them. But yeah, they really set out to make something that was very cinematic. And I don't know if you caught it a few years ago when they had the high def restoration of that episode, that two-parter, that they ran in theaters. They ran it on the big screen. It was a part of the Fathom events. And that was a terrific way to see it, just to sit down and watch it as a feature-length movie. And it really held up like that. And actually, you could say the same thing for yesterday's Enterprise. That was an episode that I think they were very clever in how they defined the look and feel of that show. It was just a great moment when the lighting changes, the camera angle changes. You know that everything is different, even though the characters on the bridge don't know that everything is different at that moment. So their world, their whole history, up until that point has led them to have this very different experience. And that is told to the audience with just the most subtle of changes, and you totally buy it. So yeah, you have those rare instances where the art department, the writers, the producers, the directors, the actors kind of all come together and craft something that's really special, that's really a standout. I don't think you could not know at the time making Best of Both Worlds that this was something special.
Absolutely. So let me turn to one of the other observations I've had, I guess, really listening to season 4. And for those who may be listening to John and I visit for the first time, he and his robot partner are on a not marathon, not ultra marathon, but a multi-year marathon journey through every episode of each television series of Star Trek. We did the animated series. We did the first 6 movies with the original cast. Now we're in the 4th season of TNG, and of course we have multiple series to go forward on. But John, it seems like your preparation is even more now. And when I hear you and Ken describe the work you've done before you sit down to record, I'm frankly stunned at the amount of work you do. And what I wanted to lead to is, how have you kept up your enthusiasm for a multi-year project? And what I see is actually more work than perhaps you used to do.
Yeah, that may or may not be the case. I'm trying to think about it because I think some episodes really demand a lot more work. Some episodes don't demand as much. And it's not to say that we're taking those episodes less seriously, but there are some episodes where I know when we sit down to record a podcast that it's really just going to be about the discussion. It's going to be about how we feel about the ideas that are put forth in that episode. There are other episodes where I think I'm aware from a very early stage, this has to be more about kind of the mechanics of the episode. How was it made? Who made it? What were they thinking at the time? So the approach changes based on the content of the episode. In fact, the one that we're getting ready to record today, which is really sort of almost a light romantic comedy, it's less about the behind-the-scenes details and more about, well, how does this make us reflect on love, relationships, the dating scene? It's about Data basically having a girlfriend. So it's really going to be more of an introspective thing and a conversational thing where Ken and I just sort of get to talk and say, what did you think about that? Now, the work is still there because it takes a long time to actually plot out an episode of the podcast. Just writing out the plot synopsis that we do, writing out the trivia, writing out our thoughts. But then we sort of go into it as cold as we can. We go into it in a way that we're having a conversation, not that we're reading from a script. So all the preparation in the world, a part of that sort of goes out the window when you actually sit down to do the show. Now, the good news is that we still have a variety of materials that I can pull from. So I'm actually speaking to you today from the Roddenberry offices in North Hollywood, and steps from me, there is a huge wall-to-wall bookcase with just every imaginable Star Trek book. And then there is a file room where I can go look up memos and scripts and all sorts of stuff if I want to pull those for the website. Now, I don't run everything, and sometimes what I find is maybe just a nugget of trivia to offer a little insight. Just some little piece of background information. But it does take time to go through all that stuff, even just to find that little nugget,
Right.
But as you mentioned, it is a long-term process. We started this in August of 2012. We are told that we will go through 2026 at our current pace. But even then, CBS announced a new show. We haven't really come to a decision yet about how we're going to handle that. Do we do something now and then do something later? We really don't know. And by the time we get to 2026, that show could have come and gone, and there might be another show in the works. So there's really no way to know.
Right. Right.
Mm-hmm.
That brings up another topic I wanted to explore, which is it is 2016. Been doing this 4 years, but 2016 happens to be a significant anniversary in the life of at least the television series, because the original series premiered in 1966. So we're at our 50-year anniversary, and I know there's just a large number of celebratory events that are going on around that, and your schedule just must be insane given what it normally is. So can you tell us what you're involved in, or you guys, you and your robot, are involved in around the 50th anniversary? Or Rod?
Yeah, well, I mean, fortunately, Ken can be, dismantled and put to a suitcase, and so that's relatively easy to travel with. Our focus right now, for just speaking for me and Ken, our focus right now is on Vegas, the huge Star Trek convention that happens in Las Vegas every year, and this one will be even bigger. It'll be 5 days rather than the usual 4. It sold out a long time ago. The hotel's sold out. I think the Overflow Hotel sold out. So it is going to be massive. I've taken a look at the floor chart for how things are arranged this year, and it's just big. There's no other way around it. It's just big, and I know that we're all going to be exhausted and exhilarated by the end of it. For the two of us, we sort of have to pick and choose our battles. We have to look at what else is Roddenberry doing as a whole. What are they promoting? What are they putting out there on the web? How does that maybe dovetail with what we're doing? And then where are we best served to meet and talk to the people who listen to our show, but also to meet hopefully new listeners who can come into the show. Side note to say that I'm thrilled that every week I get email from people who say, I just found your show, I've gone back and listened to every episode. That's really cool. That we set out to make an evergreen show that you could go back and listen to 3, 4, 5, 10 years after they came out, and I'm pleased to see that that's coming true, because that was always the goal. That was always the intention with how we make our show. Now, back to the 50th and back to what's going on there. It looks like I will be at Comic-Con in San Diego. I'm not sure doing what yet, but I'll be there. Then really the focus is on Vegas. There's the big New York convention happening over Labor Day weekend, simultaneous with Dragon Con that's happening in Atlanta. I know that Roddenberry as a whole has tried to determine how they will have some presence at really every major convention during this season, really starting kind of late spring of this year and going through the end of the year and early into next year, early into 2017. So that's to say that Mission Log will probably be somewhat a slice of that presence that they're there. I don't know that Ken and I will personally be at a lot or really most of those, but we are sort of trying to get ourselves out there in a big way for Vegas and then sort of play it by ear for what comes after that. There have been rumblings about New York, but we really haven't found out specifically if that's a place that we're going to be. But even if we're not, I can tell you that Roddenberry will be there, and by proxy will at least be a little part of that. And then as far as the show, one of the things that we love to do is, obviously we have to get out the regular show every week, but we love to do supplemental shows where we can talk to guests and we can answer questions. We haven't been able to do as many of those in the last few months as I would like to. And part of that is a matter of timing, part of that is a matter of technology, part of that is a matter of availability of guests. As you can imagine, a lot of people from the Star Trek world have also been very busy for the last nearly a year. So I say that to say that the people who do listen to us and who do like those supplemental shows, there are more coming. There are more in the works. Maybe just not as fast as you or I would like those to come. And we have also talked about doing some recap type shows. What do we want to say about the 50th? What do we want to say about where we are right now, which is actually 25 years into the history of Star Trek. So where we've landed right now is 1991. With the end of season 4. And that's a pretty watershed year for Star Trek. There was a lot of promotion around the 25th anniversary, and that was also later that year, December of 1991, is when Gene Roddenberry passed away. Right. So I'll sort of let the cat out of the bag here about what we're planning to do for the Vegas convention. Is that we really want to look here during the 50th anniversary year, we really want to look at that first 25 years. And we want to look at it through the lens of what Gene Roddenberry contributed. And that's to say that certainly he used to be lauded for creating Star Trek, for creating as a lot of people say, the sandbox that we all got to play in. But what were the good and maybe the not so great influences that Gene applied to his own show?
Right.
So we thought this was a really good time to look back at that 25 years because we are approaching very quickly that time in history where going forward there is no Gene Roddenberry to influence his creation. And I think that's a really interesting way to look back at that first chunk for us, but for the audience as well.
It certainly is, and one of the things that I guess I've enjoyed or at least appreciated more over the last 2 seasons as you presented them on the podcast is that transition and moving from either the correct direct control or having Gene's hand around it to Gene Roddenberry's hand around it to others, and the growing pains that happened, yet coming out on the other side of it with a franchise that was as vibrant and continue to grow. So at some point I'm going to try to look at that from the business perspective, but perhaps another time. Well, John, let me ask, or end rather, by asking. I know you're a huge movie fan and movie buff. We've traded stories about some of the movies we've looked forward to and enjoyed. Is there anything left in the summer season that you've got your eye on as much as you did last summer with The Man from U.N.C.L.E.?
Well, there's a little movie coming out this year called Star Trek Beyond.
I've heard of it.
Yeah. It's interesting. The J.J. Abrams films, and I guess officially now it's called the Kelvin Universe, his sort of take on that period of Star Trek, has been very controversial.
Right.
And sometimes I think for very good reasons, sometimes I think not for very good reasons. But there will be an endless source of comment, criticism, debate, and that's fine. That's what Star Trek fans do. Um, but I'm looking forward to that movie for many, many reasons. I was fortunate enough to be invited to the fan event that Paramount had on May 20th. And I have to tell you, I was blown away. Not just at the trailer that they showed, but they showed three scenes. And one scene was just absolutely full of action, and the other two were not. And the other two, one of them we'll call sort of a day in the life of the Enterprise. And it's a great conceit that it's 3 years into the 5-year mission, and they are bored. They are just bored out of their minds because every day is the same. They're out in the blackness of space, and it's the same routine over and over again. Kirk opens up his closet door, and the camera POV is from inside the closet. You just see row after row of, command gold uniform shirts. And you can imagine the monotony that would be.
Right.
So I love that scene, but there's another scene where Kirk's birthday is, I can't remember if we're actually on the birthday or we're approaching the birthday. It's like the next day or something. And he's sitting in this little sort of makeshift bar on the Enterprise, and McCoy is there to pour him a drink. And I was just absolutely awestruck with that scene because it reminded me so much of that first scene in the cage where Dr. Boyce is pouring a drink for Captain Pike.
Right.
And Pike is talking about the difficulty of command. And it so echoed that scene, seeing this in 2016 to a scene that was shot in 1964. And I just thought, you know what? Regardless of everything else, however much we may want to criticize the action or particular elements of the storytelling, there's something about these scenes that shows heart and that really shows an understanding of sort of the deep roots of Star Trek. So I absolutely cannot wait to see that. For what else is coming up, I have to say that Suicide Squad I think looks really interesting. It's about time they did something that focused on the villains
Right.
of the DC universe. I think it's a great idea. And I don't really know much about it, but it looks like a fantastic idea and a movie that's got a lot of kind of a dark sense of humor that I definitely respond to. I would have to say that I'm very curious about the new Ghostbusters movie. Again, I think it's a movie that is going to have a lot of controversy around it, and probably some for good reason, and maybe a lot of that for very bad reasons. But I'm going to go into it with an open mind and see what that is all about, and I hope I'm absolutely wowed. What else? I have to admit, had very little interest in seeing Independence Day, the sequel Resurgence, and I think my lack of interest was probably well placed because I've been reading the reviews that my friends have written online, and they've not been too crazy about it. But so maybe that's when I'll catch on Netflix later down the road.
Yeah, the only one I would add is the new Jason Bourne movie.
Oh yeah, oh absolutely, yeah,
That's coming
yeah.
out. But I'm
Hmm.
actually a big fan of the new the Star Trek reboot from just the homage perspective. And
Hmm.
your
Hmm.
comments about the bar scene in the original Cage, when I saw that, and even to this day, the thing that really struck me was the humanity of people in the 23rd century. It's really no different than the humanity of people on Earth today, and that there's still that core wherever we are in the universe. We're still humans, and we still feel in a variety of different things. And sometimes we're up, and sometimes we question what we're doing. So I'll be very interested to see if the new Captain Kirk can bring that sort of humanity to this
Hmm.
to this
Hmm.
episode as well. So
I
John,
think there's a real effort to bring that to this. So yeah, that's what I'm looking forward to.
Unfortunately, we're at the end of our time, and as usual, I've had way too much fun, and I probably should be paying you for this. But if anyone wanted to check out the podcast, can you tell them where they might go?
Yeah, easy enough. If you go to missionlogpodcast.com, you can get all of our shows there, our archive of shows, our discovered documents, and you can find us through our social media, through our website. So if you go to missionlogpodcast.com, you can connect to us through there on Twitter, Facebook, etc. We have a very lively discussion board on every episode that we post to our website. So check that out as well. We welcome you there, missionlogpodcast.com.
John, thanks a lot, and I look forward to the next visit.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tom. It's been a pleasure.